Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Export to Japan podcast, brought to you in conjunction with the team at the British Embassy in Tokyo and our proud sponsors, the British Market Council and ITIC. For today's episode, we are going to be looking into the subject of the aging population in Japan and what that may mean in terms of challenges, and what those challenges may mean in terms of solutions, and what solutions may mean in terms of opportunity. And to help us on this topic, I have a very special guest. He's somebody that I've known for a number of years who's been doing all sorts of incredible work in Japan. That's Dominic Carter. Hi, Dom. Welcome to the Export to Japan podcast.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. It's great to have you here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion with you. And one or two of you may be aware of Dominic or recognize Dominic for the great work he does with running one of the most successful sort of boutique market research agencies in Japan. And that's a great topic that I want to catch up with him on another podcast on another day. But for this particular discussion, we're going to be focusing in on that aging population. And before I dive into my first question, Dom, maybe you could just sort of give a few words of introduction about yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey into Japan, please.
Sure. Yes. Well, I'm from Australia. I was born in Canberra, and I started my career in market research in Sydney in the mid-90s. And at that time, I worked for a British company called Millward Brown. And when they were opening up their office in Tokyo in the late 90s, I put my hand up for that and went up to Japan, and that sort of kicked me off on my journey. And I've been working in consumer insights in one way or another ever since then. So that's getting on to about 25 years now.
Wow, amazing. What a journey. And I should think you've got a lot of great stories to tell as part of that journey.
Yes, yes.
And, bringing it into today's topic then Dom. So, we all hear a lot about the issue of aging population in Japan. And I know it's something you started looking at a number of years ago. So could you just give us sort of an overview of what that means and some of the dynamics around that situation of the aging population challenge?
Yes, well, yeah, I mean, it's a very, first of all, you might not think of it this way, but there is actually no country in the history of the world that has a demography that looks like Japan's does right now. So we are the oldest population probably in the history of the world. The median age in Japan is 50. I just turned 50, and actually my age is I think pretty much the most common age in Japan. So you have half of the population that's above 50 and half of the population that's below 50. There are two large cohorts in the population. There's the baby boomers and the children of the baby boomers. But the children of the baby boomers, who are kind of like the generation around my age, they didn't have children to anything like the extent that the baby boomers did. So there's a lot less weight in the population pyramid. Under the what would be the equivalent of Japan's Gen X. So it's a very interesting situation for people, especially in my age group, because the baby boomers are well supported. But how that's going to unfold for the people in that sort of Gen X equivalent generation is an interesting question.
Yeah, well, I guess once you started to get your head around this and started looking into this area and doing research in this area, maybe that's part of the trigger point that led you on to get more active in it. And I know you are one of the co-founders, along with some colleagues, of this organization called Living Best.
Yes.
And I want to talk a little bit more about that. And by the way, we'll put a link to the website of Living Best on the Export to Japan page for companies to click through and have a look in more detail on that. But let's have a look at that. I mean, what was the sort of trigger point that initially inspired you to go on this journey of Living Best?
Yeah, well, it's been, as you can imagine, if you're working in consumer insights in a society that has a population structure like this, it's hard to avoid working on those issues. So, naturally, we've worked more and more on projects that have to do with aging and how companies are going to deal with selling and addressing the needs of an aging population. When I first landed in Japan in the late 90s, we really rarely spoke to anyone who was over 50. So, you know, the times really have changed. About 3 or 4 years ago, we started working on a series of projects that we're still working on now, in the area of human-centric design in robotics. And I thought this is a very, very interesting area, obviously. And we're working with some very good clients that have a very good approach in terms of not pushing the prototypes too early, and really looking at what people need and where it is actually going to make sense for robots to come in and help them in their daily lives. And you know, these are good long-term projects, and I found that very inspiring. And the ability of technology to really help us as we age, I think, is something that kind of intrigues me. But if you sort of think about what I was saying a little bit earlier about the population structure, just the sheer paucity of people who are underneath that Gen X generation means that you could really think of it as being a slow-moving emergency. That Japan really is actually going to need technology at scale to be implemented. Otherwise, it is going to be unable to look after my generation, which is a large generation. So it's really a big challenge, and I think to some extent it's a kind of a race against the clock. And you know, it's encouraging to see recently the advances that we've seen in AI in the past couple of years, and robotics as well. It's happened faster than I thought it would be happening, but I think that there's really, you can see that there's a need to use as much technology and assistive innovation as we can moving forward. So I think it's a big need, but of course it's a big opportunity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So just on that very point, then we're getting a good picture of what the challenge is and the dynamics behind that challenge, and you started sort of identifying that there needs to be solutions out there to help people, and in a timely way. In terms of living best, then, so what is it that you guys do? How do you go about it? Who's involved? You know, tell us more about the concept of invest.
So it's a huge, I mean, if you try to put your arms around this whole area of the challenge and the opportunity in aging, it's really like there's a lot that needs to be done, but we're focusing on 3 areas. The first is trying to identify projects that we think have the ability to be successful now. So there are a lot of very interesting technologies out there that could be really, really great 10, 15 years down the track. But we want to look at projects that we can, even if they're quite modest products and quite modest projects, where we can go into the market and say, yes, we've actually been able to achieve some traction and success for aging related innovation now. And I think that's very important, because otherwise, now the area of age tech is getting quite trendy right now. And of course, we're very happy about that. But we want to avoid a situation where it just becomes another fad and people say, oh yes, well, we know it's very hard to get aging adults to adopt technology. So we tried that, and you know, it was too difficult. So, you know, basically, as I say, first thing is that we want to focus on projects that we think can be successful. Then we want to work very, very closely with users, whether that's in B2B settings or B2C settings. We want to work very closely to make sure that those very promising products are well adapted, so that user experience is good, people want to use the product, the issues in design are ironed out. That's the second phase, and then the third phase really is facilitating commerce. So we we're looking to take these well-adapted products and connect them up with distribution.
Okay, got it. That's very clear. A couple of questions on that. Are you primarily thinking to work with international companies that are looking to come into the Japanese market, or are you working with Japanese organizations within the Japanese market, or a little bit of both, or are you just sort of
At the
open to
moment,
what
we're looking mainly at inbound companies at the moment. The way that we work and at the core of what we're doing is the idea of building community. So there's a series, like the demographic structure of Japan presents quite a number of challenges. It's not just in the aging area, and in the workplace. Internationalization is a challenge as well. There's a lot of challenges for women. Now, we've been working on all of these issues in our research business with various organizations, and also climate change and sustainability as well, I think, is another issue. It's a bit more sort of exogenous to Japan. It's not a demographic issue, but nevertheless it comes in. So these are very, very difficult issues to address, especially in a traditional society that has quite, established ways of doing things. So I came upon the idea, I suppose, about 5 years ago of, okay, is there a way that we can use community to assist us with these problems? Because sometimes the problems are they're so challenging that you can't meet them just as individuals or as individual organizations. Sometimes you need to bring a lot more force onto bear to work on this. So in the aspects of filtering concepts to work out what's going to work well in terms of working with users and in terms of facilitating commerce, we want to work with members of the community, whether that's professionals. So we're building a professionals group and a users group. We want to work very closely with those people to do that. So that takes a lot of resources and energy to do that. So at the moment, we're doing that in Japan to assist concepts coming into the market. If we're going to do that overseas, we're going to need to build that community overseas as well, which is something that we want to do. And we are there's a lot of interest in what we're doing now in Japan overseas. So, it's possible. And I think when we've set up something similar to what we're doing in Japan overseas, we'll be able to look at outbound stuff as well. Because I think Japanese companies are going to have challenges going outside, just as people who are coming into Japan have challenges as well. So I think that sort of extra assistance from our community, I think, is kind of what we think very much is our kind of secret sauce in terms of being able to create success.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I'm totally with you on that. I mean, when I think through all the various organizations that I've helped with market entry into Japan, sort of getting that local knowledge on the ground and really understanding the way the customers and the potential users view the product and the solution is just so valuable, right? Because we can, as international companies, we know how it may work in our home market or what the reaction may be in other markets. But as with all new markets you enter, Japan in particular, it's often quite unpredictable how the consumers may view technology. So yes. I can see why your solution, the service that you are offering is a great way to really get to understand that level of detail.
Yes. And on top of that, it's kind of, it can be hard to, even if you can work out how to adapt your product successfully. And it can be, honestly speaking, it can be very hard for people to accept the feedback that they receive from Japanese users, because it doesn't seem reasonable, or it seems like illogical, or just, we never saw anything like that before, or we never had to do that in China, or, but Japan is very unique in the way that people look at things and the way that they make decisions, and, the way that people respond to things. But on top of that, if you're if you're coming into the market, it can be hard to work out who can actually help you on the distribution side. And it can be quite possible to get into bad relationship and to be a little bit stuck in that relationship, and things move very slowly and not as you'd expected. So one of the objectives of our professional community is that we can take a company in, and because we've already been working with these people in our community for years, we have a very good idea of who it is can actually help the company. So rather than, searching around and, trial and error and, getting involved with organizations that just for one reason or another might not be able to pull it off, we think that we can accelerate that process of getting meaningfully into the market, and that sort of collective wisdom, hopefully, that comes from the professional group can help people. And there's a lot of goodwill in among everybody for this project as well, because everyone in Japan knows that the issue of aging is the number one issue that society has to solve. So there's a lot of people that want to help, and people want to see they want to see companies to be successful, whether they're Japanese companies or international companies.
I think you make a couple of absolutely priceless points there. I mean, I've always sort of had to have this discussion with companies that are coming into the Japanese market about there's this sort of perception that it takes a long time to be successful in Japan, and you have to invest heavily in things. And of course, generally that is right. It's not a straightforward market. It is a complex market. The returns are very good when you get there, of course, but it does take a little bit longer. But what I often say to people is that when you look at the examples of companies where it does take a long time, it's because they haven't done the things that you're talking about. They haven't bothered to reach out to really understand the local dynamics. They don't listen to the customer's voice or the prospect's voice, and work out how they've got to adapt and blend. And then they get frustrated that it takes a long time. But actually, the sort of point you're making about taking that step and putting that in as part of your investment, to get that local advice, to listen to it, to pay attention to it, you're absolutely right. It's how you can save a lot of wasted time and
those connections to, just in terms of, who you would hire as your country manager, for example. I mean, that's a fundamental issue to get that right. And if you make the wrong decision on that, that'll set you back years, because you won't even know if that person was the right person until about 2 or 3 years in. And I've made all the mistakes. I'm an entrepreneur in Japan. Like, I've started businesses and some have succeeded and some have failed. I have been there in terms of making all of those mistakes. So what we want to do is be in a situation where there is some collective intelligence there, and support there, and people will always need to be a little bit of a leap of faith, because, as I said before, sometimes the advice that people are being given is might surprise them. But and of course, we don't have any special superhuman powers, right? But I think that we just want to make it as easy as we can. So great concepts, great products, well adapted, with the right people and the right networks connected to them, are going to have a much higher likelihood of succeeding than
you're right.
than those that don't have those factors.
So true. When you hear it in the terms that you're explaining it, it just sounds so simple and so logical. But it's interesting how many organizations don't quite get that right, and they sort of fall into the trap of making some of those early mistakes. So just so good to know that there's companies like yours out there, and in particular, you are the guys working in this sector that can help people navigate through it and avoid these kind of errors that may come along. So now, I wanted to ask you, Dom, are there any particular examples you could share with us? I don't know whether you can mention names or not mention names with projects you work on, but any sort of example you can share of any project you've worked on, or anything that's going on at the moment that you're working on?
Yes, yes. So we're about to launch. There's a company from Canada called Comfort Linen, and where they have it's a textile technology innovation that they have where it's their bed sheets, and you wear pajamas that they also make with the bed sheets, and it assists mobility in bed. Now, I had no idea that mobility in bed was such an issue um, for certain people. But if you suffer from something like Parkinson's, for example, you can almost be trapped in bed at night. Like the bed becomes a very uncomfortable, unpleasant place for people to spend time when you have issues like that. But just in terms of general sleep quality as well, it was a new insight for me that your ability to move easily around in bed has actually a pretty strong connection with the quality of your sleep. And this is a product that suits aging adults. So we're just about to launch these guys. We actually tested their concept in our community among 26 other concepts last year, and then we invited 7 of those companies to a pitch competition, and we got some local judges to help us because the 7 concepts all scored very well on our research metrics, but we wanted the judges to give us a little bit more experience and insight into what should be the top ones. So they placed in that competition, and there's another company also from Canada called Steadyware, which has it's a mechanical, it's not a digital device. It's a sort of a mechanical magnetic gyro device that you place on a hand for people that have hand tremors, and it cancels out the tremors, and it's really very effective at cancelling out hand tremors. So we're also we've just started our in-person trials on that product here, and we think that of course everyone that you speak to that is involved with people that has those issues and has those issues of essential tremors and Parkinson's and so forth, they're very, very excited to just even at the thought of this product, which really does have the ability to improve people's quality of life enormously. Like people who can't pick up a cup of tea and take a drink can do that. People who can't write can write again. Like so so it's very, very, in some ways it's a simple technology, but it's one that that's extremely helpful. And as I say, our criteria for the projects that we want to work with are projects that we can implement quickly, that can demonstrate that are obviously useful, and that we can demonstrate have some market success relatively fast, because we need those successes to build this whole area. If it's one series after another of projects that are very lengthy and have a lot of problems and so forth, then it's going to be an issue. Not to say that those projects are not projects that we don't want to get involved in ultimately, but what we're looking to do at the moment with what we're in our organization is to create success and to create some excitement around that, to especially in our user community, so that people who are actually genuinely benefiting from these innovations, and then these guys can be a word of mouth engine for these innovations. Like something like Comfort Linen, for example, the people that we took through the user trials, like they just raved about it. The way that people are talking about the product, you don't get that much positivity from generally speaking, and so it's very, very it's exciting actually.
Do you find, Dom, on this topic, we hear that And we know that Japan is very tech savvy, right? So at the forefront of many, many technologies. And the use of technology is quite prevalent in Japan. Is there any difference, do you think, with the older generation in Japan? Are they a little more responsive to new technology, perhaps compared to other markets in the world?
So yeah, it's an interesting. I think we found with, if you just look at robots, for example, the Westerners have this almost dystopian fear of robots. It's very, I don't know. I mean, I know some people have speculated on where it comes from, and it's got to do with our views of God and man, and all of this kind of thing. But Japanese people don't have those same hang-ups about robots, for example. But I would say I think the perception of Japanese people's facility with technology and the reality is sometimes a little bit different. We did a survey a couple of years ago, which is a mirror of a survey that the American Association of Retired People did, the AARP did, in terms of just a simple survey in terms of penetration of all of the basic sort of consumer technologies. And we saw that smartphone penetration above over 65s was the same as the US. Laptop penetration was higher than the US. That makes sense because of, the size of people's dwellings and, form factor and that sort of thing. But things like e-readers and, smart speakers and so forth, penetration was a lot lower in Japan. And so you sort of think, well, why is that? Because we have access to all of those. It's not like those gadgets and tech platforms are not available here. They are. But I think there's one of the theory I have is, I think, this idea that we need to be fixed, or it's problem solution, aging needs fixing, and I have this problem, I'm going to fix it with this. That sometimes it may be a bit of a Western way of thinking of things, and Japanese are they're much more able to live with certain issues, and that they prefer gentle, natural solutions and gradual solutions, and radical, dramatic fixes tend not to appeal to a large number of people here. So what we do with tech, it has to really fit into people's lives and fit into their philosophies of life. I spoke to a 75-year-old gentleman a few weeks ago, and he said, well, I want the technology to make me more human, not less human. And that's the that, to me, that kind of makes sense, and he's a pretty savvy, he was pretty putting over this very easygoing, oh, yeah, technology, whatever. But I looked at his phone, and it was full of apps, and he had this hearing aid which has an app on it from Denmark, which I've never seen before. But you can change all of the audio settings on the app based on where you are, and inside, outside, that type of thing. So, but I thought that was a really good. I think that sort of sums up. I think just some values with regard to tech that are that I think are valuable here.
Yeah.
But there are people, yeah.
Have you, I mean, we've in the conversation, we're touching on many different areas, and you're giving good examples of different areas of technology that you're looking at bringing into Japan at the moment, and some that are already existing in Japan. From your experience so far, I guess this is the million-dollar question, but are there any particular areas where you see opportunity for international companies? Is there anything in particular you've come across where you think there is definitely a gap here that could be filled?
Well, the whole area, I mean, if you look at, so just that area of what we look at age tech, I think can start at age 50. So anything that's, compensating or helping or supporting, or I think that can come under the age tech sort of category. So that's really wide. That can also be things like financial, fintech, health and wellness, lifestyle, medical, social, all of those sorts of areas. At the moment, if I look at, we can look at B2B and B2C, but if I look at B2B, I think that there's quite in the care space. There's quite a lot of interest in sensors at the moment in facilities, and there are quite a few companies that have interesting sensor technology that are looking to come into the market, and there is interest in the market in those solutions. Remote diagnostic tools for doctors to work with patients remotely is another area. Also, digital transformation in that care home space, which is very, very big sector in Japan. That actually there are, as you can imagine, there are a lot of care homes, and a lot of them are run on very analog systems. So there are there are opportunities there. Even areas like virtual reality. Some people are excited about that in the care space. As I say, it's not all age tech's not all about care tech. So when people think age tech, they tend to go immediately to care. But in a B2B setting, yeah, that's where you're going to have the most gravity. In B2C, we tested a few months ago 72 pure product concepts. So I wanted to get like a really wide range of different concepts, some of, from sensors to brain training apps to mobility, fall detection, all of these kinds of things. And so we tested 72 in a consumer, among a consumer target, and it came out like, because I'm a bit nerdy, it's sort of like the results ultimately came out like a bell-shaped curve distribution, which was wonderful for me. And of course the ones at the right-hand tail of that, I go, yeah, these are the real creme de la creme ones. So those ones, there are a couple of brain training apps, which kind of surprised. Maybe it shouldn't have surprised me, because brain training got really popular about 15 years ago in Japan, but it looks like there's still quite a lot of unfilled demand in brain training. There was a sensor, the wearable sensor in there as well. There's another product which was just allows visualization of speech for people who are hard of hearing. I think for the B2C stuff in age tech too, it's the stuff that we can sort of imagine being helpful, or we can easily imagine being helpful, is easier to sell in, obviously. But yeah, so that's a little bit more. Put it this way, I could say that those are the tech ideas that are sort of capturing people's imaginations right now, on the consumer side.
Great ones you've listed there, and I'm, as you're going through them, you're inspiring thoughts in my head about some of the organizations that we've worked with at Export to Japan that are working in exactly these spaces, and
right,
and
yeah,
there could be some good links we can make there. That's really good. I'm a little bit keeping my eye on the time. We need to come towards the close now, but there's just a couple more questions I wanted to ask you. In terms of, I know you've got, years of experience. You've been in Japan a long time, and you've worked on lots of different projects to help many different companies coming into the Japanese market. I just want to draw on your wisdoms from that a little bit more. I mean, one very clear message coming from you, because it's what you do, and I back it up from my experience as well, is the value of research. That's very strongly coming across, and I know that's your kind of bread and butter. So I think we've got that message out there very strongly. Are there any other little tips that you would give to international companies that might be listening in today, that are thinking to come into the Japanese market, any other little golden nuggets about what they should think about or how they should prepare? Any uniqueness about market entry into Japan, or anything else you could share with us there, Dom?
Yes, I think I think trust building is very important. Your relationships are very important. I think you have to realize that nothing happens in Japan if people don't trust you. So an inferior solution that's well trusted will be more successful than a superior solution where you haven't done the work to build the trust.
Very powerful statement, that one.
So yeah, and it's sad but true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can't be um, you can't be too arrogant. It's you really have to do the work to be trusted and have good relationships so people think that you are a reliable person to do business, and people look at the people before they look at the product. And I think that's important. I don't know. I don't want to sound like grandpa, but it's a bit it's a bit like that. And there are strategies that you can there are actually many strategies that you can do to establish trust. I mean, it's not just about being nice people and being trustworthy, although you have to, but there are, coming into the market, how am I going, if I'm an unknown entity, how am I going to convince, general buyers in the market that, this is a trustworthy solution to buy? And there are a number of, tried and true ways that you can do that. But generally speaking, they do involve working with local entities and local people and having them help you, and you being a good partner to them. So I think that's important. Another thing I'd say is, look, you are different. You will be different anyway. So, we struggle with differentiation sometimes in marketing. But, you will be different just because you're foreign anyway. But that's a good thing. So people will say, oh, we're too different. Should we try to look more like the local competitor or the local solution? The answer is absolutely not. You if you are different, you have to find what the benefit in that difference is. Like, what's the good thing about being different? And I think that's the right way to think about it. And you can indeed play that up. I think that can be successful as well. So, being true to yourself, I think, is important as well. So you don't want to be intimidated by the fact that everything is so different here. You may well have something that's very unique to offer that people will see value in.
Fantastic. Such wise words, Dom, and it's clear the depth of experience you've got from just those few words of advice you gave us there. It's really, really valuable, and I would pretty much endorse everything you said exactly as you said it. Clearly, that's wise words. Well, listen, we've come towards the end of our time, and it's been a really, really good discussion. So thank you, so much for carving out time to talk to us today. We could have gone on and on and on, and as I said at the outset, I certainly would like to catch up with you again later in this series to talk more about the more general picture of the market research work you've done. But in particular, this is such a great topic. Looking at this sort of aging society and age tech solutions and the great work you're doing at Living Best. So I was really glad to get the chance to talk in more detail about that. Well, for everyone listening in to this podcast, I hope you found that a really thoughtful and inspiring discussion, and you've learned a lot from it. Please feel free to reach out to Dominic if you have any additional questions, or you'd like to have a chat to him or any of his colleagues. What do you recommend on what's the best way? I think you're pretty active on LinkedIn, aren't you?
Yeah, just ping me through LinkedIn. Just Dominic Carter Japan will do it. Get to the right one.
Great. And we'll certainly include a link to your website on the Export to Japan platform as well, so people can have a look through that and learn more about the great work you're doing. So So wonderful. Listen, great to catch up. Thank you so much, Dominic. It's been a great discussion. We've learned so much about the challenge that's going on out there in Japan, but then turning that into some of the great work that you're doing to provide amazing solutions, which in turn gives opportunity to those international companies that are working in this space, and some really good advice for them on how to navigate through. And I would urge any of them to make sure, as part of that journey, that they reach out to you and have a chat with you, and potentially look to get some more support and engagement from you. So
Thank
thanks for
you
your
very
time
much.
today, Dominic. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for listening in. Stay tuned for further editions of the Export to Japan podcast. Thanks, Dominic.